Hartford, Connecticut. And let me start off this video by just saying, if you stay tuned to the end of the video, I do have a big announcement for the channel. You guys will love to hear it. Stay tuned, like I said. News out of the way. Earlier today at around 12:40 in the morning, the Jacksonville Jaguars announced that they had fired their head coach, Urban Meyer. Now, of course, this was notable because Urban Meyer had just been hired prior to the season. They signed him to a big, I believe it was like a 5-year, $40 million deal, something crazy like that. I could be low on the numbers. Actually, I should be able to find that out. But there were definitely concerns right off the bat. Now, Urban Meyer, of course, is a good player. Well, he was a very good college coach. And this was a known fact. People knew that he was a great coach in college ranks. I mean, he was great in Florida. He had won a national championship. Took a year off. We'll get to his coaching in a minute. But then he went to Ohio State and, of course, led them to a national championship. So clearly he was a good coach. But the problem is that wasn't all. Now, he spent a good amount of time in Florida. And like I said, at first, he was a coach at Bowling Green, so we're not going to discuss every job, just the main ones in like the 21st century. So in 2001, he took over a job as head coach at Bowling Green, which is a smaller school. I believe they play in the Mid-Atlantic Conference. I could be wrong on that one. But after a couple of years there, Mid-American Conference is what it's called, actually, my bad. After a couple of years there, he went to Utah, became the head coach at Utah, but after 2 years there, where he was very good, he was fighting for both the Florida and Notre Dame head coaching jobs, chose Florida, or I guess Florida chose him, signed a big deal with them, and he did well there, but then he left due to health concerns after the 2010 season. You know, I'm not here to talk about his health concerns, obviously. You gotta give him his privacy on that, but it was after a couple of months after he resigned from his job, reports started coming out that basically he quote-unquote broke Florida football. So a report came out that was titled, I should say, How Urban Meyer Broke Florida Football. So essentially it alleged that he had created a toxic culture in the locker room, in the clubhouse, in the organization, in the school's football program, and he decided to leave before it could, implode upon him. Now, this article quoted multiple players who played for him while in Florida, and he apparently had a quote-unquote circle of trust that included only like star players, and those players would receive favorable treatment, for lack of a better term. Now, basically what this meant is, if I was a star player and you weren't, what I could do is I could get away with, skipping, leaving a workout early, and if you and I both walked away from the workout together, and I was in a circle of trust, I would get, hey, go run a lap around the track. You would get something like, you got to run around the lap 10 times, you got to run around the track 10 times, and then you got to give me 20 push-ups. And then, Urban would be laughing, joking around with me, and you'd get benched for the first quarter of the next game. Also go out of his way to hide positive drug tests from the public. So he would essentially bribe the media and everything, like, hey, listen, you don't want to ruin this guy's career. You don't want to ruin his career before it even begins. And he would, like I said, he'd mainly do this for people in a circle of trust. And this is while in Florida. So this is obviously not a good thing, and it should have been cause for concern. But the problem was his stats, his records, everything like that showed up. Bowling Green, Utah, Florida, very successful stints at all three schools as a head coach. So when we get to the 2011 season, he works for ESPN as a commentator, but then he ends up taking a job at Ohio State, and he does well in Ohio State. Now, there is, of course, some investigations that come out here, and this was due to alleged domestic violence, unfortunately. And this wasn't his fault. It was one of his assistant this wasn't him, I should say. This was one of his assistant coaches that allegedly did it. Now, that coach ended up getting fired due to it, but Meyer apparently helped cover it up. He did not report it to, the administration, so he got suspended for this. And he ends up coming back, but he retires due to his health concerns that had been affecting him about a decade prior, and he retires after the 2018 season. Now, he ends up coming in, and in January of 2021, he was officially hired, January 14th, to be the head coach of the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, he got a big contract with the team, but there were still some concerns. I'm personally, I know a Jaguars fan, and when they signed Urban Meyer, he wasn't pumped about it. And I was always kind of pumping the brakes. Like, Urban Meyer, if this was the 70s, he could probably be a good coach. If this was the 80s, maybe. But this is the 2020s now. And you need to be able to have a mobile quarterback. You need to be able to adapt to what your players are. Urban Meyer had a set playbook in mind. Now, we've seen him work with mobile quarterbacks before, but when he got to the NFL, it seemed like he wanted a pocket passer. It seemed like he wanted to do what he wanted to do. But his time in Jacksonville is where it got crazy. So, he ends up getting fined in early July by the league because he violated practice rules during the organized team activities. So, in other words, he had people practice that shouldn't have practiced. He scheduled too many practices. You can't do that. It's a violation of the CBA, regardless of what you did. So, and then he goes out, and he loses his first game to the Texans, whatever. But what ends up happening is in October, a video comes out of him at we'll say nightclub. He was at a bar, nightclub, and there was multiple videos of him that surfaced with a younger woman that was clearly not his wife. So he, of course, took a lot of heat for this, and he ends up getting publicly reprimanded for it by the team's owner. So after this, and keep in mind, this is when the team's 0-4. They had just lost a game on the road in Cincinnati, and he's going to a nightclub. You're the coach. I don't expect that from players, but you're the coach. You gotta hold up the values of the team. So he ends up apologizing. He has to apologize, obviously. But he finally gets his first ever win, and it came against the Dolphins. Now, the Dolphins have since rallied, but that's regardless. Now, they also end up beating the Bills, so he got a couple wins under his belt. But what ends up happening is recently, very recently, as in the past 24 hours, maybe a little longer than that now, we'll say 36 hours, reports started to come out. The first one was, of course, Josh Lambo. And there were players and coaches that were critical of his treatment of them. And all of a sudden, people started questioning his job security heading into the season, or heading towards the end of the season. Now, of course, yesterday was the big one when Josh Lambo came out, and he accused Meyer of physically abusing him during the playoffs. So, I have a few different quotes here that are going to be discussing Urban Meyer. Not just quotes, but incidences. So, of course, the big one is Josh Lambo, the former kicker for the team. So, basically, Lambo said, quote, and if he says something that's a swear, X or bleep, okay? So, he says, quote, I'm in a lunge position, left leg forward, right leg back. Urban Meyer, while I'm in that stretch position, comes up to me and says, hey, bleep, make your bleeping kicks, and kicks me in the leg. End quote. Now, he says after the fact, quote, it certainly wasn't as hard as he could have done, but it certainly wasn't a love tap. Truthfully, I'd register it as a 5 out of 10, which in the workplace, I don't care if it's football or not, the boss can't strike an employee. And then he goes on and he says, don't you ever, Urban Meyer said, quote, or no, Lambo said to him, quote, don't you ever effing kick me. And Meyer said, I'm the head ball coach. I'll kick you whenever the bleep I want. End quote. So, physical assault on a coach or on a player, you can't do that in the NFL. You can't do that anywhere. I'm sorry. You can't do that anywhere. And this is probably the straw that broke the camel's back, because at this point in time, we don't have, 100% confirmation on if Meyer's going to get his money. But this is cause for firing right there. Assault on a player is something that can get you fired and should get you fired. Not only can, it should. It's just something right there. You can't do that stuff. You can't touch your former players. You can, high-five them and stuff, but you can't kick them. And also in that article, Lambo said that he, the special teams players, he never addressed them by their names. For example, he'd call Lambo the kicker. He'd be like, hey, kicker, get over here, kicker. He'd call the punter, punter, long snapper, long snapper. That just shows a toxic environment to me. You know, these are guys that do a lot for your team. Teams, if you win a Super Bowl, you probably had a good special teams. Plain and simple. Look at, I forget the year off the top of my head. I think it was like the 2009 Chargers had the best ranked offense, best ranked defense in the leagues. 2006 maybe? Either way, they had the best offense and the best defense, but their special teams was atrocious. They missed out on the playoffs. Goes to show you. So, you gotta do that. Now, earlier, a couple days before that, we had reports coming out of players or coaches coming out and not being happy. So, it's alleged that Urban Meyer said, quote, "I had a better coaching staff at Bowling Green. You guys are bleeping terrible," to his coaches. That's not good. Bowling Green is a mid-major program. And back in, 20 years ago, it wouldn't have been even anywhere as close as it is nowadays. Another report that came out said that he allegedly would threaten to fire the coaching staff every week. He created an atmosphere of fear and distrust. Now, you can't do that stuff. It doesn't work. You can't be a fearmonger. It doesn't work, especially in the NFL. Especially if you're a coach in general. If you're a manager in general, you don't want to do that stuff. It's not good to do it. I mean, I don't think I need to say this, but it doesn't even get better. So it's alleged that there are a bunch of Jaguars coaches that were talking about a mass exodus or a walkout once the season ended. The second they lost that last game, they were just going to do their interviews so they didn't get fined by the league. Walk out. Just goodbye, I quit. Here's my resignation letter. In Urban Meyer's office, it's going to be full of resignation letters. Everyone was leaving. He didn't really have a good right-hand man anymore. So, several already were ready to go. They had other jobs lined up with other teams. They had, if they had a friend, like, if you had a buddy like Bill Belichick who you knew wasn't going to lose his job regardless, you talk to Bill. Bill would say, all right, tell you what I'm going to do is I'm going to free up a spot for you. If I have to fire someone, I'll fire someone, but I like what you bring to the table. So they were ready to go. They were ready to just bolt. They had the resignation letters typed up. They had it dated for the day that they were the final game. They were going to hand it in. So it gets so bad. It just got so bad. Now, let's discuss another incident that happened, this time with another player. So Marvin Jones is probably the team's best receiver. Now, Chenault's actually a good receiver too, don't get me wrong. But Jones, I mean, he's the one that this team paid a good amount of money to in free agency. They brought him in to be a veteran presence. Why on earth would you do anything to upset him? Anyways, so that's why I chose the Lions and the Jaguars, but I regress from that. That and these are probably the two most dysfunctional franchises in the history of the league. Browns got a little bit of a break because they have at least made the playoffs in the past couple of years. I know the Jaguars did, but regardless. So apparently, what happened is Marvin Jones and Urban Meyer got into like a big disagreement, and Urban Meyer just continuously went after Jones after, I don't know if it was a bad performance or something, but so Marvin Jones, I don't know if you've ever watched like an interview with him or anything like that. He's a very mild-mannered, well-spoken type of guy. So he's respected around the league. He's respected in the locker room. He goes in, and he just, if you ask him a question after a loss, he's not the guy who goes, oh, we blew it. He goes, both sides played well. They outplayed us today. It was a good game. But he became so upset with how Meyer was in public and in private, how he would act. Of course, we see the video, like I discussed earlier, at the Nightclub. And how now we see the Lambo situation. It gets worse and worse. Now, Meyer would also go out. Do that. You cannot do that. If you're the head coach, you don't go and criticize your own players. It's on you. You're the one who mostly assembled, you're the one who brought these players in. You're the one who brought their coaches in. That's on you, buddy. You're an offensive coach. That's on you. Plain and simple. Anyway, he basically he was like really going at the receiving room, but eventually when Jones stepped up, I don't know if a physical altercation was super close to happening or whatnot, but Jones had to be like taken away by other members of the team. They're like, okay, we don't want you going after him. You're gonna get cut. You're gonna be cause for concern to be fired. Plain and simple. And it continued to get worse and worse and worse and worse. Now, another incident with the staff came out, And basically, during a staff meeting, Meyer delivered a message. He basically said, I'm a winner. I am a winner. You, assistant coach, what have you won? You, assistant coach, you're a loser. What have you won? Now, obviously, you can't even come up with a reason to do that type of stuff. He would challenge each coach individually to explain where they have won, when they have won, and then he would know their resumes, or he would have them. I can't really find out his proof, but he would know their resume or whatever, and he would say, "Okay, tell me this. This year in 2013, you are with this team. You want to tell me you're a winner? This team won one game that year. Explain. What did you do that caused that team to lose?" That's something that you do during the coaching process when you're hiring them. You put them on the spot like that. But even that's not appropriate. You know, it's something that, hey, listen, out of curiosity, what happened in 2013? I'm looking at your team. You have a great record. Do you mind telling me what happened in 2013? What went wrong? You try to get, a hostile question like that just so you can figure out how they respond to that. But you don't do it in a crowded room in front of all your other coaches when this guy is already hired. It's a joke. It's a joke. That's just something that you're not going to do. It's just, I don't know what's going on anymore. I just don't know. Now, basically, after Urban Meyer got fired, that's when some of these reports started to come out. And I'm sure there's going to be more reports that come out about Urban Meyer as the coach of the Jaguars. I'm sure of it. I kind of went off a couple different articles to get these stories, and I didn't even mention some of the game planning. Should I discuss some of the game planning? You know what? Let's discuss a little bit of the game planning. So, you had two young running backs coming into the draft. You had a first round pick that you spent on Travis Etienne, and then you had last year undrafted free agent James Robinson. Now, obviously Etienne was ideally going to be the starter, but he ended up suffering that injury to his foot, which caused him to miss the whole season, which stinks. Obviously, very talented player, if he can stay healthy, if he can rebound, but that's regardless. So then you had James Robinson. Now, Robinson was a very good player last year on a crummy Jaguars team. And how does Urban Meyer treat him? Not good. Robinson's still young. It's not like he's a 30-year-old vet or a 26-year-old vet. Probably would be a better thing to say for an NFL running back. So he's a young player, and whenever he would have a iffy game, he would fumble the ball once, let's just say, he'd be benched. You cannot do that. That's not something you want to do. You don't want to bench your running back after fumbling. Talk about killing confidence. It shows that Urban Meyer is so out of touch. He doesn't know what he's doing as the head coach. He's benching a player after he fumbles. You cannot do that stuff. It's a joke. And then you look at a game plan. Admittedly, I didn't watch a ton of Jaguars games. And I don't think anyone outside of Florida watched a ton of Jaguars games. Even if you're in Florida, why would you? The Tampa Bay Buccaneers are in your state. And I mean, even the Dolphins, at least now the Dolphins are looking really hot. So, it's just, I don't know. I don't know what he's doing. But you look at the game plans of the games that he would call. And sometimes the defense would show up. Sometimes the offense would show up. But the way he basically just threw Trevor Lawrence out there, he didn't help him all that much. He didn't give the good calls. Lawrence has been looking abysmal. Now, ideally, Trevor Lawrence gets a good developing coach. Ideally maybe Eric Bieniemy, maybe Doug Peterson as his new head coach, because Lawrence deserves that. And so does Bieniemy deserves the head coaching job in general. He deserves a head coaching job. Maybe not in Jacksonville. I don't want to sentence him to that, but you know what I mean. Anyway, so after the reports came out that Meyer was fired, it's alleged that no players were upset, no coaches were upset, no one cared. Everyone was like, oh, cool. Oh, well. And apparently agents were texting their players the peace out emoji, kind of mocking that he's gone. That tells me right there that he was clearly not liked. And can you blame him? I can't. Good riddance, bud. I was never a fan of Urban Meyer, and it's probably because of the schools he coached at. Admittedly, wasn't a fan of Florida back then. Now I'm indifferent towards him, and it probably was because of Urban Meyer. I don't like Ohio State. When they hired him, I immediately said, all right, I definitely don't like this guy. I definitely don't like this team. But now all these reports are coming out. And I still remember when that Circle of Trust garbage came out. So, it's just, you know what? Peace out, Urban Meyer. Like the agents were saying to their players, good riddance. I don't think anyone's going to miss you. And, frankly, it's good that he's gone. No one needs him. The NFL doesn't need him. Good riddance. Goodbye. Auf Wiedersehen. However you want to say it. Now, at the beginning of the video, I mentioned that I had some big news for the channel. So, this is going to be I'm going to try to say this at the end of a couple of different videos. Specifically, like live streams, ideally. But, so, in the past, if you follow us on Twitter, you'll know that I was talking about potentially doing like a hockey podcast. That idea was scrapped. However, I do have some great news for the channel and for hockey fans in general. So, well, I myself am not necessarily going to be involved all that much in this channel. If you remember, if you're a longtime fan of the channel, you'll remember Patrick. So, he decided to create his own channel focusing solely on hockey videos. This is crucial. I'm very happy to say that he and I are now partnered. The owner of Metro Slapshot, he's focusing solely on hockey. So what this means is our partnership essentially is going to have it where he does the hockey videos. I'm no longer going to be focusing on hockey, excluding in the trade breakdown series and the history of series. I will focus on those, but he's going to focus on those, on everything else NHL. He's going to focus on modern NHL. Now, there will be a few videos in there that I'm going to take part in. The first of which is already up, actually. It's a discussion of the Flyers up to this point. So, stay tuned for that. I don't know how we're going to do the playoff predictions when we get to that point. I don't know which one of our channels will host them. But we'll be talking about each other. So, definitely check that out. I will continue the Seattle Kraken video, expansion video. But don't expect that to carry on too much. But regardless, goodbye, Urban Meyer. And like I said, I'm very happy to have this partnership with Patrick. His channel will be linked in the description below. And if you ever are curious, if you check out our channel homepage, he is in our discussed channels. So the linked channels, he is right there. If you go to his channel, you'll see that we are in his. And like I said, he has a few different videos. To give you some ideas of what his videos are up to this point, he has a video where he discusses should fighting be banned or should it be kept in the league, because that is obviously a discussion. He does have the video about the Flyers. He does have some potential NHL relocation ideas. He has another video of Crosby versus Ovechkin. So definitely check him out. He's not going to do like the standing updates that I do, but it's going to be fun. It's nice to have him back in the Heartland Sports community. But regardless, I do hope you guys enjoyed this video. Obviously, if you're a Jaguars fan, please feel free to leave your thoughts in the comments below. I would love to hear what Jaguars fans have to say about the Urban Meyer saga. He didn't even last a single year in the NFL. I mean, realistically, he could be the worst coach in the modern era of the NFL. Which is saying something. There's been some real stinkers. I mean, look at Nick Saban. That did not work out at all. But I regress. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. This was the Urban Meyer saga. So, obviously, like I said, we had more than just his NFL stories. But, I mean, good riddance, Urban Meyer. Hope you guys enjoyed.